Toxic masculinity. I believe that we all have some sort of vague understanding of what toxic masculinity is. And I was doing a lot of research because I really wanted us to have some sort of discussion topic for this video regarding toxic masculinity. But if there's one thing that I found out, is that nobody really knows what they're actually talking about. You see, with toxic masculinity, there's varying definitions of it. There's various causes for why it's a thing. There's various understandings of it, and there's various solutions to it. Although, to be honest, the majority of them do just point to the fact that more men are needed, and men need to just sort it out, right? But toxic masculinity, it is a really messy area of research. So I do encourage you guys to go out there and do a little bit of research on your own to determine what you believe toxic masculinity to be and how to address it. But you know, it's just a very interesting thing that toxic masculinity exists without any of us really knowing too much about it. All we know really is that, hey, men can be mad at each other, men can be homophobic, and men can be misogynistic, and that is toxic masculinity in a nutshell. But then through all of the wishy-washy sort of stuff that I, researched on toxic masculinity, I then had a thought, right? First of all, with toxic masculinity and some of the causes of toxic masculinity, it doesn't quite hold weight depending on where you are in the world. See, with toxic masculinity, one of the things that I came across that even sparked this whole journey and trying to find it out is just a post that I came across which says that there's a lot of people out here who are being raised by single mothers, and then a lot of these teachers in schools are largely feminine. So if you are a young boy being raised by a single mother who then has to go to school, the majority of people that you're coming across who have a lot of influence in your life are women. And so because there's a lot of absenteeism of fathers and just male figures in this person's life, it just means that there's no one out there to teach them how to be a man. Ain't no male teacher. There's not really any uncles or cousins or brothers or, no grown man to teach these little boys how to be men, which then leads to the toxic masculinity because they come up with their own ideas. They try to learn things from whoever, wherever, however, and then end up basically trying to be far too macho for their own good. But if we look at, let's say, African culture, right? Chances are there is a male figure in a young African boy's life that they can look to for inspiration and advice. So, for example, if their dad isn't around, then there's probably like an older brother, there's a cousin, there's an uncle, there's a neighbor, there's the pastor, there's somebody who is running a local business. Like, chances are there is a man somewhere, somehow, who can help raise this little Negro right here. So, why then would toxic masculinity then exist in like an African culture, for example, like the misogyny that exists in Africa? Why is that then a thing? Why should that be a thing when there's men out there to lead you? You know what I mean? So that's one thing that I realized about toxic masculinity. But then another thought came to me, and that was, if toxic masculinity is a thing, what about toxic femininity? Like, toxic masculinity has its own Wikipedia article, people. It has its own Wikipedia article, it has newspaper articles, it has all sorts of scholarly articles written about it, a bunch of blog posts and YouTube videos and all sorts of stuff. There's a lot of stuff out there regarding toxic masculinity, and pretty much all of it is confusing. But for whatever stuff that is out there that is on toxic masculinity and is kind of all over the place, there is so much less about toxic femininity. And one of the first things that came up in a Google search of toxic femininity was actually an Urban Dictionary article. So let's take a look at that article, shall we, and see what it says that toxic femininity is. So it is a social science term that describes narrow, repressive type of ideas about the female gender role that defines femininity as exaggerated feminine traits like being sensitive, emotional, having a perfect appearance, and so forth. One can be feminine without being toxic, which of course I agree with. Now, some of the beliefs of toxic femininity are putting your hands on, abusing, and physically assaulting men, and then using your women card to get out of being hit back or getting in trouble. Body shaming, e.g., whose butt is bigger, who's ugly, who's fat, who's too skinny, yada yada. Giving people sex and affection in return for money, i.e., gold diggers. Prioritizing your appearance above everything else in your life, and jealousy towards other women. So, that is a definition of toxic femininity, and that strikes me as interesting because I want to ask you, the audience, what do you think about toxic femininity? Do you think it's actually a thing or not? And if it is a thing for you, then how did we get to this point where toxic femininity exists? And furthermore, how do we combat toxic femininity? Now, if I was just to spitball my ideas very, very briefly regarding toxic femininity, I think that there are two parts to play in it, right? First off is definitely the fact that women at the end of the day rip each other a new one when it comes to certain aspects of being feminine, being a woman, etc., etc. Like, you have to have a certain body shape to look beautiful. You know, ideas of beauty, definitely. That is something that is highly, highly pushed by women on other women. At the same time, let's go and flip it. Men are also very, very, very much a reason for the image of a woman being what it is. So, for example, us men, we like our women to have big boobs, right? So because we want them to have big boobs, then women feel the urge and the pressure to have big boobs. And so if a woman does not have big boobs, then men are less attracted to them, as well as the fact that women then also shame them for not having big boobs. So it's a twofer. Right? It's a twofer. It comes from both where men and women for why the image of femininity exists the way it is, and then why toxic aspects of femininity can then exist. But then furthermore, how do you solve toxic femininity? Now that's a tough one if you ask me. I mean, let's take the example of putting your hands on abusing and physically assaulting men and then using your woman card to get out of being hit back or getting in trouble. How do you combat that? Because let's look at why that happens. There's two reasons why that happens. The first reason is the fact that men themselves have established their masculinity, right? And they have established the rule of you're not allowed to hit a woman. So because we are men and we're the bigger, stronger, more dominant race, and we feel that we put it on ourselves that, look, we're not allowed to hit a woman. So now women, here's the second part, women then feel that they are invulnerable to being hit back or getting in trouble or stuff, and feel that they now have the power to be able to hit a man and abuse them and assault them and such, and then play victim with the woman card because they're a woman, they're feminine, and that's toxic. That is toxic behavior, right? So how do we deal with that? How do we deal with that? Let's go with another one, the gold digger, right? Giving people sex and affection in return for money. How do we deal with something like that? Because where does that come from? You feel me? Where does that thing come from where women feel the need or the want to show sex and affection and benefit from that? Like, is that necessarily even a bad thing? Is that a toxic trait or not? Like, there's a lot that can surround that sort of thing, you know what I mean? Let's go with one more, body shaming, right? That's a pretty easy one for body shaming, like how to combat it. But like, where did it come from? Why do we have it and such? I mean, obviously it's because of the ideal picture that we've built surrounding women and such. But I mean, where did that come from? Does it come from mainly men? Does it come from mainly women? Is it just a healthy mixture of both? Or, well, technically unhealthy mixture of both. And then how do we combat body shaming? You know what I mean? Is it the responsibility of the men? Is it the responsibility of the women? Because, I mean, let's go back to toxic masculinity. It's pretty much the general consensus that the way to deal with that is strictly on men. Women don't really have a say in the matter, right? It's down to men to define what masculinity is, what the toxic elements of it are, and then amongst themselves to just hash it out. But with something like body shaming, I don't think it's so easy. I don't think it's as simple as just all women getting together and saying, hey, look, listen, this is what it is to be a woman, and just stick to your guns and you'll be all right. Like, I think there is actually a need for the male to be involved in that discussion, because, you know, some of us guys just need to get with the program that all women are different, and that is absolutely fine. So I want to leave it with you guys, right? Toxic femininity. What is it? Is it a real thing? And if it is a real thing, how do we deal with it? Where does it come from? Whose responsibility is it to deal with? Let me know. All right, so please, I want all of you guys to engage in the comments below on this YouTube video. I will be responding to each and every comment that comes through, so please leave yourselves little comments on these YouTube little thingy down there, okay? And let us have a real nice, positive, engaging discussion regarding what toxic femininity is. I'm sure it's also going to spill out into what toxic masculinity is as well, so let's just let that conversation ride on however it decides to ride on. Please teach me something as well, because this is a really weird topic, and I am more than happy and receptive to anything that is being said regarding this topic, right? But yeah, let's just have a talk about toxic femininity. Whoops, and see what the issue is with that. All right. So until then, ladies and gentlemen, tune into the next episode of the Forbidden Juice. But this is the Forbidden Juice, where we spill the juice on all things forbidden. You dare take a sip? I'll see you guys next time.